more or less into that nature. So it seems like more contemporary and more comprehensive approach in terms of this peace building, which is focused on, every aspect into the, security sector reform and state building, and also peace building by looking into economic, socio-political and other aspects that can be important. So the summary of peace building, it can be seen, the peace builders believe the peace building by means of democratic reform, and then civil society engagement, and then more or less state building. So here even you see, whenever we talk about peace building, the state building also parallelly discussed. So that's the beauty of, the peace building and the state building. So even though the idea of peace building and state buildings are totally different each others, but in many cases or many occasions, they are interrelated. So that's the complication and the issues that we may have in Sri Lanka when we applied the both situation, peace building and state building, whether that situation really address the root causes of the conflict or not. And then again, the state building. So there are a lot of definitions and very thought-provoking situation out of this. But I limited into three main aspects. According to this Francis Fukuyama, technically, he is talking about the government institutions, technically to reform the institutions, government institutions, to make sure the legitimacy of the institutions are secure, are respected with the norms of people and the statesmen. And then, of course, you can think about the James Dobbs elaboration on the military power. He does believe that the military power is paramount important. When we talk about even the national security or even the homeland security or even comprehensive, traditional and non-traditional aspect, the military is paramount important. So, I don't necessarily to talk or necessary to example the Pakistan is one of the good example, or even Bangladesh it can be one of the good examples, or even the recent military coup failure in the Turkey, it can be supporting this argument. But still, military, it's necessity, but it can be contradictory in some point. But what I am trying to focus here, even the military role in the civil military sector is paramount important when we think about state building. Right, and then the very important thing about state building is after 9/11, or else the consequence, even the Arab Spring that we can see. So after the 9/11, so US or the NATO intervention precisely in Iraq and consequently in Afghanistan, in terms of state building based on war on terrorism, it's questionable, and it can be seen whether those affected states should be followed the Western idea of state building or not. And then again, the subsequent events in 2011, when we all know the Arab Springs, which is trying to reform the states based on the good governance, rule of law, and fighting against corruptions and all. That we all know that some level it was successful, and some level it ended up with Arab winter, like the Syrian conflict, and even in Libya, it's still questionable whether it's failed state or not. So that's we all know the states building in what term and what applicable in this regard. And then I want to, make some comparison about both aspects. Technically, the peace building is primarily associated with post-conflict environment. At the same time, state building is likely to be a central element of it in order to institutionalize peace. According to this Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, their policy document, technically, you can see the peace building is pretty much dealing with the post-conflict environment. At the same time, the state building, it's very much focused on institutionalized peace. So that's a very good thing that we can have a look. How the states are optimistic in terms of, institutionalize some area of concern. So you can have a look, the peace building, so the nature of conflict can be pre-conflict, ongoing, or post-conflict. So technically, peace building immediately in a narrow aspect is dealing with ongoing or the post-conflict. But in a broader concept, even the pre-conflict, that could be concern. So that's we see the second generation of peace building, or the Juven-led peacekeeping. It's more or less dealing with all aspects, like pre and ongoing and the post-conflict. At the same time, state building, even you see failed states, or the failing nature, or fragile and also resilient. So then the immediate state building, of course, should be deal with the failed and failing nature. And when it comes to broader aspect, even to the resilience or to empower the states or to make some effectiveness of the states. So, and then technically we can see the state building and peace building, how it interconnected. So both aspects is very much stand on the governance programming. So we all might know about the institutional reform, electronical elections and the electronical elections and the electrical reforms, and then concern over the corruptions and the military establishments and all aspects technically. And then when it comes to socio-economic recovery, it's all about the, recovery of the economy and sustainable development and so on. And when it comes to reconciliation and social renewal and inclusiveness, that we have already seen what are the necessity should be taken into account, how the mechanisms should be applied or should be bridged between warring party into the one concern. So that's all about more or less socio-economic, socio and cultural aspect. And then the non-state actors influence in this regard, especially the civil society and the religious leaders or even the diaspora, how it can be, integrate in terms of state building and peace building aspect. So now we come to the Sri Lankan context. So peace in Sri Lanka. So again, I just want to, in line with Johan Galtung theories, that negative peace and the positive peace. In fact, that we had the question right after the conflict is over in 2009, whether we still have peace or sustainable peace or fragile peace or negative peace or permanent peace or, perpetual peace, like Immanuel Kant the aspect. So still you see the negative peace is absolutely augur, the absence of conflict or the violence. So as even the chair had been already mentioning that per day like 250 casualties that we used to experience, but not nowadays. So that's a pretty good thing that we can see. And in fact, the defeating truth-led terrorism also is a very much important thing. But still, the defeating terrorism is ongoing, even though things had been locally managed, but still the overseas faction, it's somewhat, alarming. So in that case, the national development sector or even enhancing that security or inland security nature, so that's dealing with that nature as well, while we maintain the absence of violent conflict. But at the same time, when it comes to the efficiency of state building or effective state building, it should be in line with the positive aspect. So this is my point, that I see the gray area. The peace building should be focused on to address the grievances and the root causes of the protracted conflict or the 30 years of conflict. So which is, I see, is lacking in this regard, and I see it's somewhat, overlap into one another. So somewhat is missed to understand. So some point, even peace building, not covering that nature, so the state building cannot be possible, in terms of this effective states or in terms of sustainable peace and the development. So that's I can come to the, and then the nation building. So nation building process, as you all know, it's all about, to collecting the national identity or strengthening the national identity, which is somewhat in line with positive peace. So that's, we have to have the way forward how the reconciliation can be into that nature. So then you see the post-conflict state building in Sri Lanka. So now two things are in one level, post-conflict peace building or post-conflict state building in Sri Lanka. So we all look about the modern state. So we are already rich enough. We are not, we were not, failing states, or even the conflict occurred, but somewhat managed. But still, we want some sort of modern state. So how to build the modern state? So modern state, in order to build the modern state, somewhat we have to look into the common virtues about good governor, rule of law, and all these things. So that should be consideration. And then peace formations. So whatever we address in terms of dealing with peace building, but still that should be
conclude.
Okay. And again, the legal framework, how it's going to be the rule of law and all these things, and security things, and even the human security, how we are going to. So these indicators, you can see from the fragile state indicators that we are much better compared to 2009. And again, global peace index, also we are much better into that nature. So then this is my conclusion. So in order to build an effective state, I think we have the state